This is The Mystery of the Pirate's Treasure by Adela Bodie. Chapter 1, The Coastal City. Christopher Martin squirmed restlessly in the front seat of their wood-toned station wagon and sped down the network of highways toward Charleston, South Carolina. Somehow he never trusted his mother's driving, and now, even though he had helped her map out the trip, he was sure she must have taken a wrong turn somehow. "Shouldn't we be there by now?" he asked in his usual impatient manner. Taking a quick glance in her older son's direction, Mrs. Martin replied, "We've been on the road only 2½ hours, and that includes our snack time." "Golly, it sure seems longer to me." Chris hated being cooped up, but most especially on a car trip he hadn't wanted to take in the first place. "You should do like Michael and bring along a book," his mother said with a shrug of her head and shoulder toward the back seat where Michael Martin was holed up, as they usually described it, with a book. Although Chris was not even a full year older than his 12-year-old brother, he was taller by a good 4 inches. While Michael was dark like his mother, Chris was blonde like his dad, with his dad's sparkling blue eyes. But that was where the resemblance to his father stopped, or so his dad liked to say. At any rate, he tried to disown Chris's impish streak. The Martin family was seated at the dinner table when Chris first heard about this trip. His mother had received a letter from her college roommate. "You must come to Charleston to help with our summer workshop," the letter read. Like Mrs. Martin, her friend Meta majored in drama in college. But Meta had married a director and worked in the theater with her husband. For many years, the Kramers lived in the North. And then they moved to Charleston. Now their theater company was holding a summer workshop, and they very much wanted Frances Martin to help with it. Could she possibly come to Charleston, if only for 2 weeks? An apartment was available if she wanted to bring the boys along. As Mrs. Martin filled the family in on the necessary information, Chris noticed that Michael had begun to catch his breath impatiently. He always did this when he wanted to say something. It was a habit that irritated Chris to no end. Rather than waiting patiently or even interrupting, as Chris sometimes did, he just sat there opening and closing his mouth like Grandma Martin's old yard pump. Finally, Mike got his chance. Charleston was settled in 1670 by the English. It was called Charlestown then. Accustomed to Michael's bookish comments, his parents smiled at each other before Mr. Martin spoke. "Well," he said in a seemingly amused manner, "you may go, dear, on one condition." His blue eyes twinkled. "And that is if you take your elder son along." "Heck," Chris said, "I don't want to go. And I'm sure not going if Michael doesn't have to." Mr. Martin was still smiling that devilish grin Grandma Martin said he could never deny passing on to Chris. "But I can drop Michael by the library on the way to work," he added, "and pick him up in the afternoon." It irked Chris for his family to be telling him constantly that he was the pest, the worrywart, the troublemaker, and other such names. That was the way it was with the older child, he thought, always subject to injustices. Could he help it if things just had a habit of not turning out right? And as for taking up Mike's habit of reading, he couldn't think of anything worse. "I need to go to the library," Mike piped up about that time. "Miss Haley's saving me a new book on naval battles." "Okie dokie," his dad said. "To the library it'll be, right after I raise this shortcake." As things had come about, it was decided that both boys would go along with their mother, and Dad would batch it for 2 weeks that they were away. Before they knew it, school was out and the date for departure arrived. Now they were on their way from their Greenville home at the foothills of the Carolina Mountains to the coastal city of Charleston. "It's beginning to smell like Charleston," Mrs. Martin said. She breathed deeply the marshy cypress aroma. Silver cypress knees rose from inky water on either side of the road, and large water oaks spread branches dripping with moss. "Look, Michael," their mother called to the back seat. "We're nearing the coast now." Reluctantly, Mike came up from his book to answer his mother's call and take in the scenery. "Say," he said, noticing the hanging gray moss for the first time. That's Spanish moss. Yes, said Mrs. Martin. Unlike Chris, she was always listened attentively to Michael. When I was little, we used to tell a legend about that moss. Really? Asked Mike, who was also a good listener. Having gained her audience, Mrs. Martin laughed and continued, Oh, yes, we used to say there was a man named Gorez from Spain who paid a cake of soap and a yard of braid for a beautiful maiden. The maiden fled, and Gorez followed her. In desperation, she climbed a tree, and he went up after her. Did he get her? Asked Mike. All I remember of the story is that his beard got tangled up in the branches. And that's the moss? Questioned Chris facetiously. Yes, his mother answered. It's there as a warning to all who hope to win a maiden with a cake of soap and a yard of braid. Chris sneered. I wouldn't give that for a girl. And in the next breath he asked, What's the name of the place we're going to anyway? Wiggily from sitting cramped so long, he turned on the seat to face his mother. Dock Street Theater, his mother said. I was in a play there when I was a child, and I've been under its spell ever since. For the first time, Chris perked up. Under its spell, he repeated. You make it sound weird. Well, not weird, she said thoughtfully, but old and enchanting. Mrs. Martin caught her breath and let it out in a happy sigh. I never thought I'd get to return there to teach, even for a summer workshop. How far is it from the beach? Chris asked. Oh, it isn't far at all from the ocean and the Battery. Just a few blocks, but it's quite a distance from the swimming beaches. Shucks, said Chris miserably. Why couldn't I have just stayed home? I would have been all right. I'm not a baby, you know. Say, piped up Mike before Mrs. Martin had time to respond to Chris. That must be the Cooper River Bridge. He finally closed his book and was viewing the sights of the oncoming city. Yes, said his mother, as enthusiastically as she could, and still keep her mind on the traffic they'd gotten into. She was glad that Michael was taking note of the historical old town. We studied about this bridge in South Carolina history, Mike offered. It's one of the highest and longest cantilever bridges in the world. Sometimes Michael's use of big words really bugged his older brother, and Chris could not resist taunting him now. Sounds like a rooster to me. Cantilever means a bridge held up by brackets, dummy, Mike retorted. You better watch out who you're calling dummy, bird brain. All right, that's enough, boys. I'm certainly not going to try to drive in this traffic with that bickering. Well, he started it, Michael offered, and I'm stopping it too, Chris bullied. Boys, I mean it. Now, both of you, watch out for the sign for Meeting Street. We can go right down the peninsula on it. Peninsula? Questioned Mike. Yes, the city is bound by the Ashley and the Cooper Rivers. Mrs. Martin paused as she stopped at a red light and then went on. Your father and I brought you both here a long time ago. Chris may remember some of it, but I doubt if you will, Michael. You've gotten onto one-way traffic, Mom, Chris observed. Yes, I know. Most of the streets in Charleston are very old, and that's why they're so narrow. Say, this is it, said Chris. You're on Meeting Street. Good, Mrs. Martin sighed. Now, we'll take a left turn when we get to Market Street, and we'll be near Church Street. Michael, who was now sitting on the far edge of the seat as his seatbelt would allow, was the first to notice Market Street ahead. When they turned, they found the marketplace bustling with people. There were vegetables and the brightly colored blooms of cut flowers under the open shelter that ran for several street blocks. In one section, they saw old bottles for sale, and in another, handicrafts and something that looked like corn-shuck dolls in the Tricentennial Center at home. Moments after they'd turned onto Church Street, they had no doubt where it got its name. Large old churches stood imposingly on either side of the cobblestone street. Colorful harbor houses with red and green and plum-colored roofs sat along the quiet street. Gas lamps added to the long-ago look. Chris was straining to see as he read aloud from a small sign hanging on the lacy iron balcony of the building ahead. Dock Street Theater. There it is, Mom. Mrs. Martin caught her breath, and looking just as I remembered it after all these years. Chris whistled through his teeth. How many stories does that place have? 4, I believe, said Mrs. Martin meditatively, counting the attic with its gabled windows. Raising her voice tone, she said, "Now, boys, for my sake, do be nice to Nicole." "Nicole?" asked Chris, his mouth agape. "Who's Nicole?" "Why, the Kramer's daughter. Didn't you know?" "Ugh!" Chris groaned. "Why didn't I stay home?" "Chris, please," said his mother as she tried to decide where to park the car. "She's in between your ages somewhere, so you can take turns being nice to her." Chris twisted toward the back seat to give Mike full benefit of the sick look he just feigned. "All right," said Mrs. Martin as she pulled the station wagon to the curb with a weary sigh. "Let's go find out about the apartment." Chris was out before his mother had finished her sentence, taking the scanty steps to the old building in a bound. For some reason, though, he stopped short just inside one of the doors that opened from the columned facade. The large, formal entrance caught him off guard. Something about the enormous room with no other people in it had a foreboding effect on him. He stood stock still and looked around. On either side of the great stairs leading up to a landing, large vases of magnolias graced the room. There's an illustration. While Chris stood there trying to define the heaviness of the atmosphere, Mrs. Martin and Mike passed by him. His mother led the way to a small ticket window farther down on the right. "Yes?" queried a plump lady with a rather tired voice. "We're the Martins," Chris heard his mother say. "The Kramers are expecting us." "Oh, yes," the tired voice took on an unexpected note of cheeriness. "She told me to send you on up. They're in apartment 2B. That's on your right when you get to the second floor." "Thank you," Mrs. Martin smiled. She and Mike started up the nearest side of the imposing stairway while Chris dashed to the other side to meet them at the landing. In a moment, they were on the level above as they made their next flight 3 abreast on the broad stairs. They saw their reflection in a great mirror in the hallway above. "Golly," said Chris, "this is some place." "For a time, it was a hotel," his mother said, "but it's also one of the oldest playhouses in America." Just as the Martins turned down a rather gloomy-looking hallway, a door opened and someone about Mrs. Martin's age rushed toward them. "Oh, Frances!" the person screamed out theatrically. A slender lady with red hair twisted in a knot on top of her head. She hugged Miss Martin and then turned to the boys. For a second, she seemed all eyes to Chris. Her large, dark eyes were heavy with mascara and all smeared with some blue gunk unlike anything Chris had ever seen before. In fact, in the dimness of the hallway, it all seemed a bit eerie. "So, this is Christopher and Michael." "Yes, Meta." Their mother smiled down on them. "And I do hope they aren't going to be in the way." "Of course they aren't. Come on in and see Tom and Nicole." She ushered them down the hall as she talked. "I had just that minute told Tom I was going down to watch out for you. Did you have any trouble finding us?" "None at all," Frances Martin assured her. "It was tiresome, though," Chris said. Just then, Meta opened the door onto the most interesting room Chris had ever seen. It was decorated in bold black and white stripes and highlighted with red. The chairs were oddly shaped with scoops for sitting. Enormous throw pillows served as seats around a heavy glass coffee table. A white bear rug stretched in front of the fireplace. The bear's eyes stared at Chris. In spite of himself, he let out a whistle. "Chris," his mother said in embarrassment. "On the contrary," his mother's friend said, "I'm glad he likes it, and I want the boys to make themselves right at home." "Tom, honey," she called, "they're here. Nicole." In answer, a tall, slender man came through a swinging door from the kitchen. His soft-soled shoes took him quietly and quickly to Frances Martin's side, where he gave her a friendly kiss. "It's wonderful to see you again, Frances." His voice was husky and well-trained. Chris looked at his younger brother to see if Mike was taking all this in, but Mike had already found a bookcase and was peering intently at the titles. Everyone was talking loudly when Mrs. Kramer called again, "Nicole, darling, where are you?" Before the words were out of her mother's mouth, Nicole made her entrance. Like her mother, she had large dark eyes in her small-featured face, and her long blonde hair fell from a center part almost to her waist. She was slender and about Chris's height, and she wore tight-fitting hip-hugger jeans and a leather-fringed waistcoat, or vest, that blended with her smoothly tanned arms and face. Chris had not meant to look at her so long. He was trying to pull his eyes away when Mr. Kramer went over to his daughter, put his arm around her shoulders. "And this," he said, "is my little prima donna." It's a word for someone who is the most important. "And you have a very beautiful prima donna," said Mrs. Martin. "And," thought Chris, "that girl is a snob, and she's going to get in my way."